Now, ABC 7 News at 5 on your side.
Good evening. Tonight, I'm reporting for you live from Philadelphia, where crews are still going through the wreckage here of the scene here where Amtrak train 188 derailed here in northeastern Philadelphia. They are still searching that crash site, looking for any signs of any people who may still be trapped inside even at this hour. Now, that train was traveling from D.C. to New York when it derailed around a curve in northeastern Philadelphia. Now, we should also advise you that we're standing by for a press conference with the NTSB. We've been waiting all day to hear from them, and as soon as they get started, we'll go there live to cover that. But right now, we know that 7 people are dead. More than 200 have been injured. 8 of those people still in the hospital in critical condition at this hour. We've got team coverage of the tragedy on the tracks. Brad Bell and Suzanne Kennedy joining me here in Philadelphia. Jeff Goldberg and Stephen Cheetah are back in D.C. monitoring the impacts there. Let's start with Brad Bell here in Philadelphia. Brad.
Well, Leon, I'm in the middle of a crowd right now that is waiting for that NTSB briefing that we expect to start at any moment. Just beyond those police officers, beyond those buildings, the search is continuing at this hour to make sure that there are no more casualties, no more survivors, no more victims at that train wreck. The mayor described how they expanded their perimeter, expanded their search area. A lot of people very lucky to be alive tonight, with some terrifying stories to tell. Jeff Cutler is one of the lucky ones, bruised but alive to tell the story.
We were going around a curve, and I could feel the train lift and go off the track. And as that was happening, you could tell it was out of control.
He was in the second car behind the engine, flipped upside down. Beth Davids was riding in the third car. She remembers her emotions when the train stopped tumbling.
I mean, just being glad that you're like, it stopped, you're alive. Okay, now what?
Of the 238 aboard Amtrak train 188, the 710 out of D.C., 7 are killed. 200 suffer some form of injury, several critical. Philadelphia's mayor says it's amazing to him that this 7-car derailment wasn't much worse, because he described seeing mangled cars scattered off the rails, people screaming, a desperate search for survivors.
To see it in the daytime is almost indescribable. It is painful, and it is amazing. It is incredible that so many people walked away from that scene last night.
The train had just pulled out of Philadelphia's 30th Street station on its way to New York. The curve where it crashed has a 50-mile-an-hour speed limit, but the train was reportedly going more than 100, according to information gathered from its black box data recorder. The engineer already questioned by police.
It seemed to go around that curve fast, and too fast for the car to stay on the track, and it went flying. You could feel being in midair for a few seconds.
Well, of course, the NTSB hopes to shed a little more light on that man's theory about what happened here. They have an awful lot of evidence to go on. They have a data recorder from the engine of that train, and they got that out of there completely undamaged this morning. They have forward-looking video in that train. They're also going to look at the records, the safety records and the maintenance records of that train, as well as the human factor. It's impossible at this point to know just how much the NTSB will reveal when this press conference begins, but it's possible they already have a good deal of information. Philadelphia, Brad Bell, ABC 7 News. Leon, back over to you.
All right, thank you, Brad. Now, officials, as you know, have been very, very slow to reveal information like identifications of the people who have been involved in this crash, especially those who have died. But we are beginning to learn some information. We do know about 2 of them in particular. Jim Gaines was a software architect for the Associated Press. His wife says that the 48-year-old father of 2 was on his way home to New Jersey after meetings in D.C. Another of the 7 victims who died last night was a midshipman at the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis. Jeff Goldberg is there now live. He's got more for us on Justin Zemser. Jeff?
Well, Leon, it has been a day of deep sadness and mourning here at the Naval Academy. Not surprisingly, word spread fast this morning of the death of Justin Zemser. We are told that certain events were canceled throughout the day here today as midshipmen mourn the loss of one of their own. One look at Justin Zemser's picture gives just a sense of the talent and enthusiasm others saw in him. Today in New York, his mother Susan giving a brief statement to reporters.
This tragedy has shocked us all in the worst way, and we wish to spend his time grieving with our close family and friends. Seth
Zai is a plebe at the Naval Academy and close friends with players on Navy's sprint football team, where Zemser played wide receiver.
The sprint football team's been pretty down. Everyone was pretty close to him.
Zemser, a 20-year-old sophomore at the academy, was on leave and on his way home to Rockaway Beach in Queens, New York, when the train crashed. A standout high school football player and class president of his high school, Zemser had also served as an intern in the office of New York City Councilman Eric Ulrich. Today on Twitter, Ulrich called Zemser a bright, talented, and patriotic young man who will be sorely missed.
Losing midshipmen is just like losing a family member.
Like Zemser, Jet Minak is a sophomore midshipman.
My prayers go out to his family and to his company mates and to anybody that knew him, but yeah, it's tough.
He's 20 years old. He was just beginning his life.
Judy Schwartzberg and her husband co-own the Big Cheese Deli in Annapolis, where the Navy is family.
It is a terrible loss to the Academy. We're all in shock.
And the Academy has not yet commented publicly on the death of Justin Zemser, but they did put out a statement this morning in which they said that grief counselors are available for those in need. A press conference is set here for tomorrow morning. Live in Annapolis, Jeff Goldberg, ABC 7 News.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Now, one of the common refrains that we've heard from people that we've talked to up and down the street here is that the emergency response last night was nothing short of phenomenal. Ambulances arrived here almost instantaneously, taking people who have suffered in this crash to 10 different area hospitals. One of them is Temple University Hospital, and that is where Suzanne Kennedy is standing by now. Suzanne, what's the latest from there?
Well, the good news is, Leon, the number of patients here is declining. 2 more have been discharged within the last few hours, leaving the number of patients here at the hospital at 22, 8 of them in critical condition. Several of them will need surgery tomorrow.
There are so many people worse off than me right now.
That passenger was able to walk away from the derailment. Others had to be taken on stretchers and were transported to nearly a dozen Philadelphia hospitals. More than 50 injured passengers were taken to Temple University Hospital, where this afternoon its chief medical officer updated patient conditions.
The most serious and challenging injuries have been a lot of rib fractures. In fact, I was startled to hear, as we ran down the list of the patients this afternoon, almost everybody had rib fractures.
At the 30th Street station in downtown Philadelphia, the flags were lowered to half staff. Outside the final station that train 188 passed through last night, the Red Cross assisted more than 70 passengers today. They provided blankets and toiletries to impacted travelers.
They just feel so lost. Just thinking that how could this have happened to me? They've been very quiet, and you can tell that they're in shock.
The chief medical officer here today also said that he was surprised that there weren't more head traumas, that most of the injuries here were fractures. He said given the nature of the derailment, he expected to see a different type of injury from the patients that were brought here overnight. Amtrak is here right now assisting patients as they are discharged to help them get to their final destination. That chief medical officer is saying that he anticipates that all of the patients here will be discharged within the next week. Reporting live from Temple University Hospital in Philadelphia, Suzanne Kennedy, back to you.
All right, thank you, Suzanne. That's good news for those people there in that hospital and their families as well. But turning now to the impact of what happened last night on rail travel in the Northeast. As a matter of fact, in the nation. Some numbers that might surprise you. Amtrak says, according to their latest numbers, that the rail corridor between Washington and Boston is one of the busiest, if not the busiest, not just in America, but in all of North America. Now, that is absolutely stunning if you think about the numbers. Also, Amtrak carried 3 times more people between D.C. and New York as the entire airline industry. And Union Station turns out to be the 2nd busiest station in the country. And you can imagine last night's derailment is causing some issues for travelers. Stephen Cheetah is live at Union Station tonight. He's got an update for us from there. Stephen?
Leanne, a sea of chaos inside Union Station continuing at this moment. Thousands of people arrived here today intending to board trains to New York and points north, only to encounter the effects of the tragedy in Philadelphia.
Everybody, if you want to go past Philly, there are no trains going past Philly. None.
Throngs of travelers heading north on Amtrak, suddenly in an unexpected destination.
Hell.
From riding on a train to scrambling for alternate modes of transportation.
They had us go from line to line. And annoying. So we don't even know how we're going to get to Jersey now.
After hours, some wondered just where they should.
We're going to interrupt that report right now to take you to the NTSB's live press conference. Let's listen in.
Issue safety recommendations to try and keep these accidents from happening again. Before I go any further, I would like to offer our sincere condolences for the loss of lives and the injuries that people have sustained, and our thoughts and prayers are truly with them. NTSB investigators began arriving here in Philadelphia between 4 and 5 this morning, and the majority of the GO team was in place here in Philadelphia by about 9:30 this morning. Upon arrival here on the scene, we coordinated with the local officials, the first responders, and then we conducted a pretty thorough walkthrough of the accident site to be able to get an idea of what we're dealing with, sort of the lay of the land. At noon, we held an organizational meeting where we established our investigative protocols and parties to the investigation. The investigator in charge is Mike Flanagan. Mike has over 40 years of railroad experience, and he has more than 15 years of accident investigation experience with the NTSB. He is leading a multidisciplinary team of accident investigators that will be looking into the track, the signals, and I'm talking about the train control signal system, the operations of the train, the mechanical condition of the train, to include the brake system, the recorders, survival factors, and emergency response. In addition to our investigative team, we have experts from the NTSB's Office of Transportation Disaster Assistance. They are here to help facilitate the needs of the victims and their families. Here's the factual information that we presently have. Last evening, Amtrak 188, an Amtrak Northeast regional train, departed Philadelphia's 30th Street station at 9:10 p.m. bound for New York City's Penn Station. The train consisted of 1 locomotive and 7 passenger cars, and according to Amtrak, there were 238 passengers and a crew of 5 for a total of 243 occupants of the train. At approximately 9:21 p.m., while traveling through a left-hand turn, the entire train derailed. Just moments before the derailment, the train was placed into engineer-induced braking, and this means that the engineer applied full emergency brake application. Maximum authorized speed through this curve was 50 miles per hour. When the engineer-induced brake application was applied, the train was traveling at approximately 106 miles per hour. 3 seconds later, when the data to the recorders terminated, the train speed was 102 miles per hour. I will indicate that these are preliminary figures of speed, subject to further validation, but we're pretty close on that. That's our first look at it. It's a pretty complex thing. You don't just press a button and press and it spits out a speed. We have to measure the wheel speed and then put that into a formula, but we're pretty confident that the train was traveling pretty close to those speeds, within 1 or 2 miles per hour. The train had recorders, it had forward-facing video cameras, and it had an event data recorder. Both of these recorders are being sent to our laboratory for analysis in Washington, D.C. We did get these initial speeds that we just provided you with from an initial download of the event recorder. We've released the track back to Amtrak, and they will begin rebuilding it very soon. The locomotive and all but 2 of the train passenger cars are currently being moved to a secure location where detailed examination and documentation can occur. Throughout the next few days, the investigators will work on scene to thoroughly document the accident site and gather factual information. We will be doing a more detailed documentation of the rail cars and the scene. We plan to interview the train crew and other personnel. We would like to interview passengers of the train. We will be conducting a site distance test. We'll be testing the signal system, the train control signals. We'll be testing the braking system, and a detailed analysis instead of the cursory analysis that I mentioned earlier of the recorders. We'll be doing a very detailed download and analysis of those recorders. Our mission is to find out not only what happened, but why it happened, so that we can prevent it from happening again. That's really what we're here for, is learn from these things so that we can keep them from happening again. I suspect that our investigators will be here in Philadelphia on scene for about a week. I want to emphasize that we're not here on scene to determine the cause of the accident while we're on scene. We're not going to speculate. Our purpose for being here, I like to describe it as that we are here to collect perishable evidence, which is that information that will go away with the passage of time. That's really what we're here to do, is collect that information that will go away with the passage of time. We can go back and do the analysis later, but we have to capture those data very carefully now. I feel like for just arriving on scene this morning, I feel like the preliminary information that we have is robust, but we still have a lot to get. I know that you have a lot of questions. We have a lot of questions, and our commitment to you is that as we are discovering factual information, we will be releasing it. I would be looking for a press conference about this time tomorrow to tell you what we've learned tomorrow. And that's the way it works. Our investigators are out in the field doing their jobs during the day, and they report back to me so I can report to you. I would encourage you to follow us on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @NTSB. As I wrap it up, I'd like to thank the first responders for all of their efforts. They've been out here through the night, through the early morning, all day, trying to secure this area. We want to thank them for their hard efforts. Now, I will call for questions. I'm going to call for questions. What I'd like for you to do is raise your hand. I will call on you, and once I call on you, please state your name and your outlet. Let's go.
Yet to talk to the engineer. There are reports now that he did not comment on what happened before the curve and the application of brakes fully.
Have we talked to the engineer? The answer to that is no, but we plan to. This person has gone through a very traumatic event, and we want to give him an opportunity to convalesce for a day or so before we interview him. But that is certainly a high priority for us, is to interview the train crew right here.
Okay, we want to break away right now, but we just got their confirmation of something we've been waiting to hear this evening. NTSB now confirming that they have sent the data recorders to Washington, D.C., and their preliminary check of the information therein indicates that at 9:21 p.m. when that train was making a turn, a left-hand turn just north of Philadelphia, somehow the braking system had to be induced by the engineer, and it was done so at a speed of 106 miles per hour. And as we reported earlier, that section of rail is only rated for 50 miles per hour. We understand now that the braking then was kicked in by the engineer near 9:21 p.m. at 106 miles per hour. Right now, the NTSB saying, as you just heard them saying, they feel like they've just gotten here to the scene. They've just arrived is how they feel. But they do have lots to work with at this particular point. We understand that. We've learned now they did find forward-facing surveillance cameras that were there on board the train. That information is being sent back to Washington, D.C., along with the data recorder and an event data recorder. So there's still a lot to go through here and in Washington, so we expect to learn quite a bit more as this investigation proceeds. Allison and Scott, back to you for now.
All right, Leon, thank you very much. We'll check in with you a little bit later.